Hello, Rabbi.
Hello, Reggie. How are you?
Doing good.
Fantastic. Baruch
How about
Hashem.
you?
Doing all right. We're doing all right. Everything's okay. Hello, Davida. Something's up over here.
Hi, Rabbi Mendy.
Oh, didn't mean that. Hello. Something happened to my screen over here. It's a little bit interesting today.
You're the star of the show now,
I'm
Rabbi.
the star of the show. I guess it's this. All right. Hello, Eugenia. Hello.
Hello, Rabbi Mendy. Hello, everybody.
How's the weather today in Calgary?
Nice and sunny, but it doesn't mean anything. We could have this change of the season in 2 minutes.
All right. I hope it stays nice and sunny. All right. And we have Avigail back with us. Hello, Avigail. And Adel. And Yael.
And Aviel.
And Aviel. Look at that. Baruch Hashem. The whole mishpucha. And Marlene is with us. Hello, Marlene.
Hi, how are you?
Good, Baruch Hashem. Oh, there we are. All right. And Davida, quite the picture you got there. All right. And Michael, hello, Michael. How are you?
Good morning.
Good morning, Michael. Remind me where you're from, Michael.
I'm Alexandria, Virginia.
Alexandria, Virginia. I was thinking you were going to go on with Alexandria, Egypt.
Rabbi Fine was sure that I was from Alexandria, Egypt.
Oh, okay. I guess we come from the same Talmudic tomes. That's the only Alexandria we know.
We taught you well.
All right. Alexandria, Egypt was at one time the center of a big center of Judaism. They had the Talmud talks about in Tractate Sukkah, a huge synagogue that they had there that was so big that the only way the people in the back knew when to answer Amen was by there was people waving flags in the middle so that they could see, time to say Amen now, because they couldn't hear the Chazan. That was Alexandria, Egypt. Very cool. All right. Are you in a different time zone than us, or are you also 12:04?
Oh, I'm Eastern time. I'm straight south of you, probably about 1,000 miles.
Oh, okay.
I don't know how far north of New York you are, so I'd say 250 to New York from here, and then whatever it takes.
All right.
But I've driven it.
You've done the drive.
Oh, yeah. I've seen everything up. I love Canada.
You gone up the Adirondacks?
Yes, my brother actually lived in Saratoga Springs for a while.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. I've been there.
Family were there.
Incredible.
Anyway, I will go back to my hiding place here and continue.
Okay. No worries. Full respect for that. All right. And Tim's with us. Hello, Tim. And we're ready to roll. Welcome to everybody here on Facebook. There we go. We got Tim's hand. All right. We know he's there. Okay. In today's Chumash, we've got 3 subjects, and each one is like a whole subject on its own. It could take us a whole day. And I have so much interesting material here to share with you. I don't know where to start, where to stop, where to continue. So I'm gonna share with you. I guess we'll start with one and see what we can continue with. Hello, Liba. And
Hi, Rabbi.
hello. Welcome. All right. I'm going to put everyone on mute and share the screen, and then we'll go from there. Let's do that. Participants. Okay, and of course, as usual, please do jump in at any time to share with us your thoughts. And here we are, sharing the screen. Let's pull it up. So we have three things to talk about. Number one is, as we spoke about, we touched on yesterday, the whole idea of redemption or redeeming, or again, I guess starting off with selling your fields and your houses in the land of Israel, and the basic idea of understanding that the Almighty allotted to each tribe when they came into the land of Israel a certain space where they should be, and that was for a reason. Just like all of us have our place in the world, and wherever we end up owning or having is meant to be ours for that time, because only our soul can deal with the sparks that are hidden within that thing. Hello to Berachos. Welcome. And Richard's with us. Fantastic. Okay. So that's the so that was the first thing. Kind of we continue with that idea, and it's pretty much broken up into three parts throughout the parsha of this week of Bahar, the first parsha of this week. We are in the third reading of Bahar Bechukosai, and basically, if we weed out is probably a negative term, but if we take from the verses, we understand that there's three things that we're dealing with. Number one is fields. Okay, so fields, generally, the rule, for a field which was inherited, again, from the times of Joshua, when we came into the land of Israel, it's meant to remain in the tribe. If someone had to sell their field, and the only reason they were allowed to sell their field was out of complete destitution, they were very poor, and they needed the money. Otherwise, they were not allowed to. Interesting. So he cannot redeem it before 2 years after the sale has happened. These 2 years had to be productive years which the field could be used, years where the new owner was able to reap the harvest in each of those years. After those 2 years, the original owner was entitled to redeem it at any time. If he failed to do so, the field was returned to him in the yovel for free. So the idea is like this. Basically, when selling the field, the knowledge was that in 50 years' time, and I'm sorry, not 50 years, but by the time Jubilee comes around, the field will come back to the owner. That was one of the definitions of the Jubilee year, of the Yovel year, in the times when, in the temple times, when Jubilee had its impact. Jubilee is every 50 years, 50, and therefore, depending on how far away you were from the Jubilee year, that's how much you would sell the field for. So if you were 10 years away from the next Jubilee and you're selling your field now, so you know that you're selling the field for only 10 years. So you sold it, and as the Torah commanded us in the previous, in a few verses back, yesterday's portion, 2 days ago, that you only could sell it for a smaller amount of money, because the person that's buying it from you is really just buying the rights to use your field for 10 years. After 10 years, it's coming back. So that price tag on that field is going to be way different than if you were 49 years away from the Jubilee year, and this guy potentially, the buyer potentially would potentially be able to use the field for the next 49 years. So that would be a bigger price tag, obviously. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that after 2 years of it being in the buyer's hands, the original owner had the permission to redeem it back. Redeem it back meaning by paying up the difference. So if it was 10 years, my math is not so good, but let's figure this out together. If you had 10 years going and you sold it for $10 a year, so you had $100 down on the field, and 2 years are up and you want it back, so you'd obviously have to give back to the buyer $80, and you could take back your field. In the first 2 years, you could not take it back. Now, it's interesting that the Chinuch, in his explanation of this mitzvah, one of the commentators on the mitzvahs, he explains that the Torah granted the owner of the field the right to redeem it, since that's where he gets his livelihood from. However, in order to discourage sale just for the sake of convenience, the Torah did not permit redemption for 2 full years after the sale. Consequently, an owner would resort to selling his field only if he was forced to, out of great necessity, knowing that for the next 2 years, it would be off limits to him, would be a kind of a scare not to sell it just out of any other reason, but if it was desperate for it. So that's the first category. Stay achuza, it's called. Then we move on to houses. Okay, so to real estate we spoke about yesterday. Hello, Irma is with us, and I think Leslie joined us here. Rabbi Yaakov Yehuda, hello, Rabbi Yaakov Yehuda. Okay, so let's jump back. We have what's called Bate Ir Choima. That's the first verse over here, and then we have what's called Bate Hachatzeidim. So let's take a look at the first verse just to get a kind of an insight from the actual pasuk with Rashi. This is going to be the second category. If a person will sell a residential house in a walled city, okay, so that's going to be the second category, a house in a walled city, versus the third category, which is going to be a house in an open city, a city that's not walled. So then so actually Rashi does point out the very first Rashi. What is the definition of a house in a walled city? It's the house that was in a city that had a wall in the days of Joshua. And it could mean that wall was taken down, or not. But that was the kind of the honor given to Joshua, was the walled cities of his day had certain rights that other cities we talk about. The day of Purim is celebrated differently for a walled city such as Jerusalem, which was walled in the days of Joshua, etc. So that's the idea. That's the second category. So it's a house that's in a walled city. What's the deal with that? The deal with that kind of house is that if someone sold his house located inside such a city, so then he had the right to buy it back at any time within 1 year after the sale. If he failed to redeem it within that year, it became the permanent property of the new owner. Not only could the original owner never again redeem it, but even the arrival of the Jubilee year did not restore the house to him. So that's the special category of this type of house, that the owner had a year to buy it back. Otherwise, it would remain in the hands of the buyer. And then the third category is going to be what's called the house in the house that's not in the here in verse 31. When you have houses in open cities, so meaning it was a city which had no wall in Joshua's time when they first entered the land of Israel, then he could redeem it. He could redeem it, and if he didn't redeem it by Jubilee, then by Jubilee it would come back to him, and he could redeem it in fact right away. He doesn't have to wait 2 years. So that's pretty much the three categories of the real estate in the land of Israel. Okay, so if you're buying and selling in the land of Israel during the Jubilee years, you have to know exactly which type of house you're buying, which field you're buying, and then based off that, you would box it into one of those three categories. And then besides for that, today's Chumash continues with cities of Leviim, the Levite cities. The Levite cities, the Levies never really got a portion. The tribe of Levi didn't get their own portion in the land of Israel as an inheritance that was allotted to the rest of the tribes. The Levies didn't get their own simply because they would be busy with working in the Beis Hamikdash, in the temple. God says they are, your land is my temple. You've got to be busy. You can't have land back at home that you got to be worried about in agriculture and business to run besides for the temple. You got to be totally focused. So therefore, the Leviim were given a total of 48 cities around the land of Israel. And those were called Ari HaLeviim. Some of them were what's called Ari Miklat, cities of refuge, but they also had many others besides for those. And basically those cities, there's specific rules of how a Levi city should look. It's not today's Chumash, but it's interesting. It talks about how there has to be open fields surrounding it. by certain measurements. It cannot be built. Kind of like a, I don't know what the right word would be, but kind of like got to be a special city for the Levis. Well, I guess when we get to it, we'll discuss that more, exactly how it was supposed to be kind of built, or the landscape was very specific. Either way, the Levis had their special rules of how buying and selling went when it comes to their own fields or houses. So that's pretty much the agricultural, the real estate rules. Now, the reason why, besides for the beginning of today's Chumash, and pretty much the first section of today's Chumash, and pretty much the first section of the Parsha, the reason why I feel it is especially important before we move on to the next part is because the holiday of Shavuos, which is just coming around the corner. And as we spoke about last night at our Monday night class, and I hope everybody will have the chance this Shavuos to, with good health, and if again, as we stressed last night, to if you feel that you can, and again, it's in a legal way, and it's also in a healthy way, because life is of top priority. But if there's, for whatever reason, you feel comfortable going to synagogue, then Shavuos is a good time to go and make it to hear the 10 Commandments being read in the proper setting in a synagogue, by the Torah scroll, by the Bima, and that way you relive the actual giving of the 10 Commandments that happened 3,334 years ago. It's a very important thing, and that starts with young children, very young children from a month old, should be in shul to hear this 10 Commandments on Monday, 2 weeks from yesterday. So again, if where you live, it's safe and it's something that people are comfortable with, and with all the restrictions and logistics involved, then make it happen. I know some shuls are having shifts to ensure that everyone can hear it in a safe way, social distancing and all the other restrictions involved. So look out, see how you can make it happen, and make it happen. So Shavuos, one of the things that is connected very much with Shavuos is the story of Ruth. The story of Ruth. Ruth, it was a convert from the Moabite princess, and her story is kind of famous. The reason why, or one of the reasons why, she has such a connection with the holiday of Shavuos, because she, accepted the Torah upon herself as a convert, as a righteous convert. And many other connections there are, but the story of Ruth is an entire book in the Tanakh, the 24 books of the Torah, of the written Torah. Megillas Rus, one of the Megillas, and it's 4 chapters. It's not very long, so it might be a good idea over the next 2 weeks to kind of brush up on it. And there's lots of great resources out there to brush up on it with commentary, and really to get what's going on and the ins and outs. But it's a story of commitment, a story of true commitment, which is really what it takes to lead a life of Torah. And we draw inspiration from that. So many congregations have the custom to read the story of Ruth on Shavuos, different times, depending on the community. But one of the main topics of the story is exactly this: whole idea of the buying and selling, or the redemption of real estate in the land of Israel. So what I want to do is I want to read to you a part of the story, and I hope that with reading this now, when it comes to Shavuos, and you might be reading up on the book of Ruth, you'll have a better insight into the whole story based off this parsha. So I'm going to read to you a part over here, and hopefully it will be sufficient to have a understanding. We have the main characters of the book is Naomi. Naomi is a widow. She loses her husband, and she loses her 2 sons. Very unfortunate. So she's together with her daughter-in-law, Ruth. Ruth is her daughter-in-law, and they kind of skipping through, but they basically are now living together in the land of Israel in poverty. And Ruth was spending the day collecting grain, part of the gifts for the poor. So there's certain parts of the fields that owners needed to leave for the poor. So Ruth, being living with Naomi and being poor, was able to go and collect from the fields. Which field was she hanging out in to collect the grain? She was hanging out in the field of Boaz. Now Boaz is another main character in the book, and Boaz happens to be one of the leaders of the generation at the time. Very special, holy, big guy, big person, big personality in our history. So when Naomi hears that Ruth is hanging out in the fields of Boaz, she exclaims, she says, Baruch Hashem, thank the Almighty, because Boaz is actually related to us. He is one of our redeemers. Okay. Now, what's she referring to in saying redeemers? This is what she's referring to. It's actually from yesterday's portion. So let me pull up yesterday's portion here, just so we get the actual verse to explain what I'm talking about. When he's saying, but what Naomi was talking about by saying that Boaz is one of our redeemers. So it goes like this. Verse 25. If your brother becomes destitute and sells some of his inherited property, right? That's the only reason, as Rashi points out right away. This teaches us that a person may not sell his field except when under the pressure of poverty. Again, we're not into giving away our tribal rights. But if a person needed to, so then, so then his redeemer who is related to him shall come forth and redeem his brother's sale. And as Rashi points out in the last Rashi, the purchaser cannot stop him. So then basically it continues with the rules of when if a relative comes forward to redeem the field for his poor relative, so then you got to work out with how many years are left to the Jubilee, as I mentioned earlier, with the math involved to ensure that the buyer leaves with all his money back. So that's where the redeemer kind of walks into the picture. So that's so Boaz was a relative of Naomi, so he says, oh, he's our redeemer. Now, she referred to the fact that poverty has forced her to sell her husband's and son's fields, Naomi, and she hoped that Boaz, as a relative, would buy back their property. Okay. Naomi instructed her daughter-in-law to visit Boaz and to remind him of his obligation. She knew that he would be spending the night in his granary to guard the harvest which had just been gathered. That evening, Boaz ate his meal, studied Torah, and lay down to sleep on the threshing floor of the granary. In the middle of the night, he was awoken by the appearance of a woman in the granary. Who are you? He asked. I am Ruth, your maidservant, she replied. And what is the purpose of you coming here? He asked. I came, she said, to remind you of the Torah law. The Torah commands in chapter 25 of Leviticus, our chapter, verse 25, which was in yesterday's portion. If your brother becomes poor and has sold some of his possessions, and if his near relative comes to redeem them, then he shall redeem that which his brother sold. You, Ruth tells Boaz, are my late husband's relative. Therefore, you are obligated to buy back his fields. I also request that when you redeem my husband's property, you acquire me together with it. Meaning, marry me. By you marrying me, the name of my late husband will be remembered. It will always be associated with his property. For whenever I come to the field, people will remark, this is Machlon's wife, being Machlon being her deceased husband, who originally owned the field, which now Boaz would redeem, and therefore it would give further life to her deceased husband. Boaz promised her, since you came here to ask that I fulfill a Torah law, I swear that I will see that your property is redeemed. However, according to the Torah, the obligation first rests with the closest relative, and there is one closer than I. There is someone closer than I. I shall ask him tomorrow if he wants to redeem your property. The next morning, Boaz asked the other relative, a man named Tov, whether he would purchase Ruth's field and marry her as well. When Tov refused, Boaz redeemed Naomi and Ruth's field and marries Ruth. So there you go. That's the medrash on the story. And again, if you look at the story now, I believe it's already towards the end where this whole kind of, it's a little bit cryptic, but the whole story of how the Boaz, it kind of sends Ruth, or says, really there's someone else that should be redeeming the field. So now, but then the guy refuses, so Boaz is the next in kin, we would call it in English. So that's now we have a little bit more of a context based off the parsha, hopefully to give us a little bit more clarity into that story. And of course, Boaz and Ruth become the ancestors of King David. So that's a special, and ultimately Mashiach. So a special union there. Talking about Mashiach, when Mashiach will come, we will begin to count anew the sabbatical years and the Jubilee years. Sabbatical we still do today to a certain degree, and it's kept today to a certain degree. But when Mashiach comes, we will once again go back to the wholesome biblical law, and of course the Jubilee, which is not practiced today, will come back. We'll have the idea, all these laws will come back, of all these real estate laws will come back, and this is noted by the Chinuch again. Okay, so that's that for this section. I saw Davida, you raised your hand. And Shaul is with us. Welcome,
Yes,
Shaul.
but, sorry, Randy.
All right.
You just answered it.
Yes.
You just answered my
Sorry?
question.
Oh, I answered your question. Okay.
Yeah, I raised my hand, but you just answered my question.
All right. No problem. No problem. All right. That's
I have a
11.
question.
Read your thoughts through a Zoom. That's I don't want to reveal all my holiness, but okay. All right. Sorry, Shaul, you said something?
Yeah. Is it well, we don't believe in coincidences, but we're discussing 49 years of the Golden Jubilee during the time of pretty close to 49 day, the 49 days of Omer and Shavuot.
Yes.
What's the link between Jubilee and Shavuot? Land? Agriculture?
Right. Great question. That is a good point. I never thought of that. Could be that's mentioned somewhere. And actually, I think David or Liba, you mentioned it last night in the class. One thing that I forgot about, and when we celebrate Shavuos, we do celebrate somewhat of an agricultural sense. We kind of spread greenery and trees. So there is something to that, although that's more connected with the fact that that Mount Sinai blossomed. But there is a connection, Shaul, not necessarily to so much the Jubilee, but more to the 49 being, well, I guess it is Jubilee. Basically, the idea of 7 times 7, the idea which equals to 49, that's really what Sephira is all about. It's all about counting 49 days because it's 7 weeks. It's a total of 7 weeks. 7 weeks,
Right.
Each week having 7 days is going to get you 49.
Yeah.
Same thing with the Jubilee, or so it's counting 7 cycles of the Shemitah year. Shemitah year is every 7 years, so 7 times 7 is going to get you 49, and the 50th. Now there is connection to the number 49, simply, or I shouldn't say simply, but a little bit on the deeper level, because 49 is the number which man can attain. It represents the number that a man can attain. The 50th level is the level which only God can gift. So it's up to us to climb the 49 levels, and then to be open to the God-given gift if he so wishes. So that's the idea. In fact, Moshe Rabbeinu, his whole life spent climbing up the 49 rungs, and only on the day of his passing was he gifted with the 50th, which is represented in the fact that he passed away on a mountain called Mount Nevo. Nevo, I don't know in English if that mountain has an English name, but Nevo is the letters in Hebrew are Nun, Vez, Vet, Vav. And
They call it Mount Nebo
Nebo
in
There you
English.
go.
Yeah.
Thank you, Deb Herschel. Yeah, Mount Nebo. So there you go. So Nun Boy. If you split that in Hebrew, you get Nun. Nun is the numerical value of 50. Boy means in him, which means that he was buried on that mountain, or he ascended that mountain on the last day of his life, essentially symbolically showing that he was given the 50th level. The Nun was gifted boy into him. So that's the idea. That we do by counting the Sphira, right? Counting the Omer, we are ascending every day another level. So we're trying to cleanse ourselves and to mature ourselves and to rise to the best of ourselves through the 49. And it's interesting, Shaul, because Shavuos is what day of the 49 of the 7 weeks, what day is Shavuos?
50th.
The 50th. It's not in the
Exactly
49
right.
days.
No, it's the
Right?
50th.
The 50th day. So Shavuos, the truth is, and this is really what I wanted to discuss last parsha, because it's really in last parsha, but once we're on the subject, it's important to know. Oh, hello, Diane. Diane's with us too. And Celia, welcome back. All right.
Sorry, I'm late.
No, I don't. No, just saying hello. That's it. No apologies needed. The idea is that Shavuos is the 50th day after counting 49 days. So again, let's keep it on track. The idea being that you or an I can count 49 days. We can do that. But Shavuos is God's gift. Like the Torah is God's gift to us. That's only after we count 49 days. Then there's the 50th, which we are gifted with from above. On a practical level, on a halachic, even a practical halachic level, the fascinating thing about Shavuos is that there is no set date on the calendar that Shavuos should be.
Right.
Which means that different than Pesach, which is always going to be on the 15th of Nisan, or Sukkot, which is always going to be on the 15th of Tishrei, Shavuos is always going to be on the 50th day after you start counting the Omer. So it's not a set day on the calendar, but it's 50 days after, which means, and trying to follow this, I did this actually once. If you cross the date line in middle of the Sephira, okay, so I did that. I came back from Sydney, Australia. I flew back to New York, and I missed a day. Sorry, I jumped a day.
Added a day.
I added a day. I don't know what I did. I did something weird.
You added a day.
So what happens is, basically, my 49 count ended before everyone else's did. So my Shavuos was a day earlier than everyone else. I celebrated Shavuos a day earlier than everyone else in New York. Because it's all about my count. It's all about my count. It's when you are finished 49 days, the 50th day. And if we look closer, it was last parsha. You look closely at the verses, it says, on the 50th, you should count 7 full weeks. And on the 50th day is Shavuos. It doesn't say, like it says by Pesach and Sukkot, it gives you the date on the eve of the 14th or the 15th. It doesn't say dates. It's after 7 weeks of counting, 50th day is Shavuos. So it has very practical ramifications. Before you do that, talk to somebody for more details. It's not like so simple necessarily. I learned the hard way, but it was fun. Let's put it that way. I got the cheesecake a day early. So that's the no competition there. All right, I bought out the cheesecake before anybody else thought about it. So that was the perk over there. All right, so that's the that's 49, 50. We're talking about so the same thing again. Shaul, 49 years leads to the 50th year of Jubilee. Again, it's about the 50th being a gift from God. It's a holier year. It's a holier setting. It's a holy reality. The truth is that Mashiach comes. It talks about in the Kabbalah uses these words that there's going to be these yoivlois shining, which basically means we're going to have these Jubilee-ish type of reality. So it's a higher sense of reality, which is going to be gifted from above, and we'll experience it then. I don't know what exactly it's going to do, but it's exciting. All right. That's that about that. Okay, let's move along to the next part of today's parsha, which is very important, and that is the obligation to put a needy Jew back on his feet. Okay, so let's see that in the verse. This is this verse over here. We're talking about, as we can see, we're talking about poor people. That's really the line, and the truth is that the Rashi pointed out a few days ago in the beginning of the parsha that really a person to sell his field in the land of Israel was a result of sinful behavior. There's a sequence to it, and the sequence is following the parsha, following the order of the parsha. The sequence basically goes. If he transgresses some of the Shemitah, sabbatical laws, then he will have to sell his possessions. If he continues to to go against those prohibitions of the sabbatical laws, then he'll have to sell his field and then his house. So there's a whole downward spiral, and yet this poor person is still in need of our help. And even though, so it's a kind of a telling lesson that even if we see someone that's poor and we kind of blame them for it, which sometimes happens, at least in my judgmental mind when I'm not aware of it, right? So we kind of put things in context and say, oh, you know why that guy's poor? Well, could be doing other things. So that's something I'm challenged with and I have to work on. But here the Torah says, yeah, there's people which will get to their state by means of which are not right. That's not my place to judge. I got to help them. Makes no difference how they got there. That's the verse here. If your brother becomes destitute and becomes poor, and his hand is sliding, he's faltering, he's slipping. The first command is strengthen him. Strengthen him. Give him chazak. Give him chizuk. Now, how do you give such a person chizuk? The answer is put him back on his feet. That's the first way to give charity. The best way to give charity. In fact, the Maimonides lists 8 levels of charity. And if I remember correctly, the best way to give charity is to give the guy a loan. To give the guy a loan and kind of forget about it. But the idea is to put the person back on his feet, to allow him or her to build themselves up, not just to be a recipient, but rather to be a partner. And this is one of the sources for the mitzvah of charity. The main source is in a different parsha, but here there is lots of talk about this mitzvah, the importance of it. And the beautiful thing is that we are commanded to be charitable with everybody, and even a ger toshav. A ger toshav was what's in English called a resident alien, which might have different implications nowadays. But back in the biblical times, it meant a non-Jew who lived in the land of Israel, who accepted upon themselves the 7 Noahide laws. We were commanded to support them as well. I want to share with you a few stories, beautiful stories the Medrash shares with us about such an important mitzvah to inspire us. And so I'll just touch on the last part of today's Chumash. It talks about the prohibition against taking interest, which is very applicable till today. And the fact is that there are numerous details to this prohibition, many of which are quite nuanced, and it's important to know. And for those that are interested, I can share with you there is a phone number of a collection of Torah sages that are well versed. They focus on these laws of interest. It's so important in so many areas that if you have any questions, you can call them up and they will answer your it's called ribis, your interest questions. I'll put the number down on the chat when I finish. So if you want to take down their number, it's a 1-888 number, and quite an important one to have on you. So here's some beautiful stories about charity. There is the Talmud tells us that in the Talmud, in the Beis Hamikdash, in the temple, there was a room that was called Lishkas Chashai, which means the chamber of secret gifts. And it was there that God-fearing Jews donated money, and poor people would come anonymously and live off of it. So that's another one of the higher levels of charity, is giving it anonymously and taking it on, meaning where you don't know who you're giving to and the poor man doesn't know who gave it. We called it a pushka, a charity box. It's one of the highest levels of charity. Unless the pushka is going to a certain cause, which is also a good charity, but not in this context. Excuse me. The Talmud tells us some beautiful stories. Another story, Rabbi Lazer, one of the Talmudic scholars, he noticed a certain poor person walking behind him, and he purposely dropped a coin, giving the impression that he had dropped it by accident. The poor man picked it up and hurried to return it to him. Rabbi Lazer turned to him and said, "Oh, you can keep it. I had already given up hope of retrieving it." So that's some good advice. Next time such a thing happens. Here's a very important story to keep in mind, and probably we'll finish off with this. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai one of the great Talmudic scholars, dreamt on the night of Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is the time of the year, the beginning of the year, when our destiny of the year is kind of summed up of what exactly is going to happen to us that year, specifically in our income, how much money we will make. And he dreamt that his two nephews would lose a total of 700 dinars, 700 coins in the course of the coming year. So after Rosh Hashanah, he visited his nephews right away, and he told them that right away that they should take on to support the needy. They should get involved in supporting the needy in a big way. So they asked him, where should we get the funds from? So Rabbi Yochanan said, no, I don't mean you should go collecting for the needy. You should give to the needy. Mark down exactly what you're giving. And they obeyed, and they gave out large sums of charity. Towards the end of the year, a government official came to them demanding that they pay the government 700 coins. When they didn't react, 2 soldiers appeared and had them thrown in jail. Rabbi Yochanan heard the news, and he went to see his nephews in jail. He asked them, how much money did you share altogether for charity? How much did you give? So they told him, we marked it down like you told us. So he retrieved their records, and they calculated that they had given out exactly 683 coins. So Rabbi Yochanan told them the following. He said, let me tell you how to act. Give me another 17 coins, and I guarantee that you will leave prison. So they said, what do you mean? They told us we owe 700. We need 17. We're out. We're scot-free. Well, he said, listen, just give me the 17 and everything will be fine. They gave him the 17 coins, and he went to see one of the government officials. And with the 17 coins, he had his nephews freed. The nephews came to Rabbi Yochanan. They asked him, how did you know that the 17 coins would be enough to set him free, to set them free? So he told them the following. He said, listen, I had a revelation on the night of Rosh Hashanah that you would lose 700 coins exactly. Since I knew you were going to lose them, I figured that if you give them to the poor, then you'd lose them to a good cause. So they asked him, why didn't you tell us? Would have saved us a lot of heart trouble. He said, no, I wanted you to give charity lishma, for the sake of heaven, not to get out of. So it's a good thing to know. There's always a certain amount of money that's going to come out of our pockets. It's up to us where it goes. All right. L'chaim to that. Okay. Thank you so much for joining me here on this wonderful Tuesday. And I will see you, please God, next tomorrow. I'll leave in the comments. I'll leave in the chat the number for that. What's called a bet-in for the laws of interest. So if you have any questions, if you want to find out more, you can give them a call. Otherwise, have a wonderful day, everybody. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very
Thank you,
welcome.
Rabbi
Bye-bye.
Mendy.
That was awesome.
Very welcome. All the best.
All right. Hello, everybody. And welcome.
Hello.
How's everybody
Hi,
doing?
Rabbi.
Hello.
Rabbi, I have to leave at 1 o'clock. I have a Hebrew class with Lenny Pleat at 1 o'clock.
All right.
Sorry, Rabbi, I'm leaving now.
Not
Sorry.
a problem. Don't be sorry.
Be happy.
That's it. Okay, let's get this organized.
Can't see you.
You don't see?
Nope.
Rabbi, you're invisible.
You're just a little figure.
Hold on.
There we go. I'm coming on.
Now you see the Gemara in front of you. Do you see the Talmud?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Wonderful.
Beautiful.
Okay. So we're going to continue our Talmudic discussion. We yesterday spoke about King David and going to war, the process in war, and how we need to engage appropriately, from the advisor to the sages in the Sanhedrin to the Urim V'Tumim, and through that process, hopefully we are, we do things appropriately according to the divine will. So we now come back to the discussion about midnight and the whole idea of the harp, the lyre, and its role with King David. So Rav Yitzchak bar Ada, and some say it was Rav Yitzchak, the son of Rav Idi. Anybody know the difference? Who's who? Who's on first? Who's on second? I'm not certain myself. Who they are in the Talmud. So they ask, from what verse is it derived that David's lyre would wake him up at midnight? How do we know that? We had verses previously that spoke about his engagement before midnight, after midnight, but where is it that says that the lyre, the harp woke him up? So in Tehillim, in Psalms, chapter 57, verse 9, it says, awake. It says, awake, my glory, awake, harp and lyre, and I will wake the dawn. So this means that the playing lyre was already woken, and now I must engage in Torah studies until dawn. Okay. So this is from this verse over here. Talmud continues. Second. Talmud continues. Rav Ashi said, this question is unfounded. One second. Oops. How did I skip over here? But I did, accidentally. Okay, Reb Zera. So, according to this then, he knew precisely what midnight was. And we brought up earlier, if you recall in conversation, about Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, that he was told by God that the death of the firstborn Egyptian would be at midnight. But yet, when he gave over the information to the Jewish people, and to the Egyptians, he said approximately midnight. So we have an issue that we've been dealing with is, how is it that King David knew midnight and Moshe Rabbeinu didn't know? What's going on? So Rav Yitzchak bar Ada, So Rav Zera offered a different solution to the question whether Moshe and David knew exactly when midnight was. So he says that Moshe most certainly knew when it was midnight, as David also knew, because the question is that, the issue over here that they're trying to deal with, that if David knows exactly when, King David knows when exactly midnight is, how is it that Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't? That he says only kichatzot, at approximately chatzot, when God said bichatzot, exactly chatzot, exactly midnight. Moshe Rabbeinu is the greatest prophet, so how is it that King David would know this and Moshe would know it? This is the issue over here. Based on the fact now we know that midnight, he knew exactly when it was because that's when he was awoken. So the Gemara said, if David knew, why then did he need a lyre? If he knew, the Gemara answers, he needed a lyre to wake him from his sleep. Now, I'm not exactly clear on what the answer of this is. Not exactly getting it clear. If anybody has any suggestions, please help me with it. Hold on one second. I couldn't find an answer to this. One second. So what I'm not clear is if David knew when it was midnight, why does he need the liar? And liar would wake him up from sleep. So how did he know? I don't get this, to be quite honest, and I couldn't find anything. I'm not clear on the what the Gemara means over here. If anybody has a thought on that, please share. But I want to come back to it. Similarly with regard to Moshe, since Moshe knew the precise moment of midnight, why did he say about midnight instead of at midnight? So Moshe did this because he maintained, lest Pharaoh's astrologers err and believe midnight to be earlier. Since no disaster would have occurred, they would say Moshe is a liar, right? No one was going to die, so they'd say he's a liar. Moshe spoke in accordance with the principle articulated by the master. Custom your tongue to say, I do not know, lest you become entangled in the web of deceit. I want to stop here for a moment on this. Think about it for a moment, folks. What's going on over here? Moshe Rabbeinu is speaking to Pharaoh, speaking to the Egyptians, right? And he's telling them it's going to be around Chatzos, but not exactly Chatzos, even though, remember, he's a messenger of God. God says clearly at midnight, and he's not giving over that message precisely. Why would he do that? So is he saying, what's the answer the Talmud gives us? Is because the astrologers would make a mistake. They would be off on the timing, and the people would think that he's a liar. Yeah, all right? So therefore, he didn't want to be considered a liar. So therefore, he said around Chatzos. Okay, it makes sense. But let's take this apart for a moment. How does it make sense exactly? I mean, how much time would they be off? They're not going to be off an hour. They're not going to be off half an hour. They might be off a few moments, maybe a minute, maybe 2 minutes, maybe 3 minutes. So 3 minutes, destruction wasn't wrought. And, it would become 3 minutes later, for argument's sake. Right, 3 minutes later. So, okay, so in the end, they did get killed. So it came 3 minutes later, let's say for argument's sake. What's he so concerned? And who is he concerned with? Who is he concerned with? The Egyptians. It's not like the fellow Jews, to tell them something, but that the Egyptians would think that he's a liar. I mean, they live a life of lies. So big deal. Why is it such an important thing? Is the question clear? In other words, we can't control what people think of us, right? And if you're doing the right thing, so what that someone's thinking wrongly about you when you're doing the right thing? And here, and especially in this instance over here, where it's going to come a few moments later. It's not like coming, sometime later. And it's not as if it's going to make any difference in reality. In reality, if the firstborn is going to be killed 5 minutes earlier or later, or even if they were way off, I don't know, way off, how much could they be way off? I mean, they were, they did have a wisdom of this, that they wouldn't be so way off. So what's the big deal? So with this, it gives us insight into a righteous person. A righteous person doesn't want that anything will come out of their mouth that should be not only not true, but that might be perceived as untrue, even by an evildoer, even by someone like an Egyptian. That's the commitment to truth. Truth is not like on this level. It's not like, do things truthfully, do things honestly. No, there is an avodah called truth. There's a service, a divine service, that it itself is truth. And righteous people are so careful to make sure that everything is absolute truth. Give you, many of you know the story of Hey Tavis, of the books that were stolen out of the Rebbe's library. And ensued a court case, which was the nephew of the Rebbe who was taking books from the library because he wanted to profit from it, because they were very, precious books from, centuries back, and could make a lot of money, and he made a lot of money from it. So a court case ensued, and in that court case, the Rebbe told the lawyers that the lawyers were told by the Rebbe that the main piece of evidence he believes that will win the case is a letter that the previous Rebbe wrote, to the head librarian of the Jewish Theological Seminary here in New York. And in there he writes that the books that are in war-torn Europe, they belong to the Agudas Hasidic Chabad movement. Please make every effort to get them and bring them back to America, or bring them to America. So those who were who stole the books from the Rebbe, and their lawyers said, well, the previous Rebbe was lying when he said that. It was a white lie, because the status of a library that was private, you would have no jurisdiction, or no country would have a jurisdiction to ask another country to bring them to America. So American courts could not ask any European country to bring private property in the time of war to America. But if it was something that belonged to the public, that you could. So they suggested that that the previous Rebbe only wrote that because that's the only way he could get his personal library back to America. And the judge, who wasn't Jewish, after he understood about what a Rebbe is, he got testimony from Elie Wiesel, he got testimony from many other great people, and from Jewish scholars and so on. And he came to the conclusion in the court case, saying that there's no doubt that a man of this stature, such a holy person, would not lie for a moment, even to save his own library, if it was his own library. The fact that he wrote that it belonged to the public, to the Hasidic, to the Agudas Hasidic Chabad, to the umbrella organization of Chabad, is because that's the truth. So it's an amazing idea. In other words, the truth is the truth, and a righteous person would take painstaking efforts to always make sure that nothing but the truth is expressed. We see this, the Rebbe himself, when he was in France. They came around while he wasn't home, and this is, I don't know if it was Nazi collaborators, I'm not certain exactly what it was, but the Nazis already come into France, conquered France, and they now they were going around to checking and documenting who lives where and who's Jewish in those particular homes. And they came to the Rebbe's residence, the Rebbe and the Rebbitzin. They weren't home at the time. And later on, when they came home, so the neighbor said, "Oh, I just want to let you know that, they came to register who was living in the home over here. So we did you a favor. We told them that you're not Jewish. So that way they won't come back and they won't make trouble for you." The Rebbe, I think he thanked them. I don't know, but whatever. And went down immediately to the registrar and said that this address, this apartment, the people that live there are Jewish. Whoa. The Rebbe didn't want that truth should not be said. An absolute truth should be not even, he didn't even say something that wasn't truthful. It was a neighbor who meant well, and no question about that, right? Wanted to help the Rebbe. But a righteous person wants anything about them to be expressed only in the truth. And even though, he might say, well, don't do that. He might not save your life. Even at such an expense, the truth is the truth. That's like very powerful. So why is that? What does it mean exactly? How do we digest that, and how do we understand that? How does a person come to that? So my understanding is as follows, is that a person who the presence of God and God's reality and truth is the only reality, it's absolute. Truth is absolute. It's absolute. Was absolute. Is that clear? And being that it's absolute, there's no wiggle room, right? A little to the left, a little to the right, it's absolute. So righteous people are like that. So Moshe Rabbeinu didn't want for a moment, even if it's only a moment, that someone should think that what he is saying in the name of God isn't absolute truth. Since they're going to get it wrong, they're going to not have the right timing, and therefore the word of God isn't absolute. So therefore he only said around midnight, not precisely midnight. At the precise strike of midnight, da-da-da. He doesn't say that. God says it, and that's what happened, but he doesn't convey that. Because absolute truth is absolute truth. Right? Also, you might say, well, but isn't it absolute truth bechatzos, at midnight? So why are you saying like chatzos? It's not like you're not saying the truth. You're saying the truth when you're saying that, right? Yeah, it's not like you are saying the truth. And again, that no one should think that the word of God is not absolute truth. So that's a very powerful idea. Any questions, any thoughts on that? Okay, so I see in the chat, let me. Okay, so Davida says, would it relate to King David being awoke at midnight because so it came about whenever the evil spirit from God came to Saul, David would take the harp and play it with his hand, and Saul would be refreshed and be well, and the evil spirit would depart from him. Similar to why we wash our hands after Modani. Yeah, I don't know how that fits in what we said over here. That's not what we said over here. So, I mean, good point. I don't know how to fit that in over here, though. Into what we learned over here. So let me think further. Maybe if you have more that, Davida, you can elaborate on, please do. Eugenia says, I found a fascinating article on Torah.org. It says, before going to sleep, David was opening his window. At midnight, Hashem blew the northern wind and made the sounds in David's lyre, the harp hanging on the wall, waking him up. Yes. Yeah, that's what we're talking about. So the question, though, is, if he knew exactly when midnight is, what does he need the harp to wake him up for? That was the question in the Talmud. So I'm not clear on what the Talmud is telling us, that's all. I am not clear on the Talmud's teaching, that's all. Okay. Many times we're not going to be clear on stuff.
Rabbi, would it be humility that even though there were great people of status of King David and Moses, they should not be so arrogant as to think they know exactly when midnight, they know absolute truth, that with all their greatness, they still had flaws and were human?
Well, for Moshe Rabbeinu, we just gave the reason, right?
Yeah.
So why he says, in other words, he did know when Chatzos is, he just didn't want that they should make a mistake and think less of, God's prophecy, or God's, not prophecy, God's, decree. But King David does say in Tehillim that bechatzos, at chatzos. So why does he need the lyre, the harp, to wake him up if he's aware of it? So what I see one explanation over here is, there's an opinion, if you recall, that he kind of dozed a bit here and there the first half of the night. So even though he dozed part of the night and he was aware, yet there were times, I guess, that he was that the harp would wake him up from the 40 winks of sleep, something to that effect. Okay, Davida, because when you are sleeping, part of your soul is in other worlds. I was wondering if that brings his soul fully back down into his body. Good question. Well, he stayed up after midnight. Remember, he was like a lion. There was the opinion that before night, he was like a horse. Like a horse only, has dozes off, doesn't have a full sleep. After midnight, he was like a lion. He was fully engaged, like a lion. That's what we learned according to one opinion earlier, if you recall. So I think this goes according to that opinion, that he was kind of dozing off before midnight. So at times he needed to be awoken, and yet he was at the same time aware precisely when midnight is. Something to that effect. I don't get it fully, be quite frank. Okay, but that's okay. We learned Sunday night at class, if you remember. We learned about that. You know, we might not get it. And ultimately, learning Torah is not about understanding. We need to understand. Well, before we come to understanding, we need to be given over to the holiness of Torah, that it is beyond understanding. Right? Let's continue in the Talmud. Okay, so according to this opinion, accustom your tongue to say, I do not know, lest you become entangled in the web of deceit. Oh, see, like I said, I don't know over here. Because, you know, sometimes you just want to look good, so therefore you're trying to make up whatever. And I hope not to do that. All right, Rav Ashi said, the question is unfounded, right? So he explains. In other words, remember, we're trying to understand. Moshe Rabbeinu is given by God he's given told by God rather, that at midnight is going to be the plague, and he says at midnight, right? So as Moshe was standing at midnight on the 13th, leading into the 14th, when he pronounced his prophecy, and Moshe told Israel that the Holy One, blessed be he, said that tomorrow at the exact time like midnight tonight, I will go into the midst of Egypt. This indicates that the passage should not be understood to mean about midnight, an approximation, but rather like midnight as a comparison, liking midnight tomorrow to midnight tonight. So another opinion says he didn't do it because of the Egyptians, right? That they're going to make a mistake, but he's telling the Jewish people, like midnight tonight will be tomorrow midnight. So kichatzois doesn't mean approximately midnight, around midnight. It means midnight, just like midnight tonight. There will be midnight tomorrow night, because this was when he told the Jewish people was on the 13th. And when did this happen? On the 14th, the following night. So that's what the opinion of Rav Ashi is. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu is referring to. Okay, now the Talmud continues. So the Gemara now explores King David's character. Right, and remember I told you that the Talmud is like a stream of consciousness. Right, it is said, a prayer of David, this is from Psalm 86, keep my soul, for I am pious. What does he mean by that? Keep my soul, for I am pious. Ki chosidani, shamra nafshi. In other words, guard my soul, keep it, preserve it. Him and the kingship. And why? Because he's not like other kings. He's not like other kings. So he explains. Levi and Rabbi Yitzchak debated the meaning of the verse and how David's piety is manifest in the fact that he went beyond his fundamental obligations. One said, David's declaration of piety referred, because remember he says, Chosid ani, which we translate as pious, right? Because I am pious. David's declaration of piety referred to his awakening during the night to prayer. Right? In other words, what's the piety to this? Most kings, we learn from the Shema that they wake up in the third hour of the day. That's why the Kriya Shema is till the third hour of the day, because kings wake up later because they are privileged people as opposed to hardworking people. But King David, he says that he has a piety that he's awakening during the night in prayer. He wakes up midnight, and he stays up the whole night. So in other words, he's not like other kings. Why is that important? Because the kingship should therefore be held in the house of David, and it should not be removed. Why is he concerned with that? Is because Saul, before him, Shaul, was the king, and it was removed from him. So he's praying to God and saying, I have the piety that, based on that, it should not be removed from the house of David. And so David, before the Holy One, blessed Master of the Universe, I am not pious, as all of the kings east and west sleep until the third hour of the day. But although I am a king like them, at midnight I rise and give thanks. So Massey, he's saying to God, what, I'm not pious? Remember, he's talking to God, right? And asking of God that, should be kept the kingship in the house of David as a result. And the other sages said David was following before the Holy One, blessed be he, Master of the universe. Am I not pious? For all the kings of the east and the west sit in groups, befitting their honored status. So now he's also making a distinction. Not only does he wake up and a whole night he's learning, right? But he's not only learning, but look at what other kings do. They have honored status, and they only, who kings sit with? Royalty sits with royalty. They don't sit with the commoner. But I sit as a judge who issues ruling for the people. Women come with the questions of ritual impurity, and my hands become soiled with their blood as I labor to determine whether or not it is blood of impurity. And she has mentioning a woman's status, right? And if it is, then she's impure, and if not, then she's, she's permitted to be with her husband. And with the fetus that miscarried at a stage of development before it was clear whether or not it is considered a birth. And with the placenta, which a woman sometimes discharges unrelated to the birth of a child, right? As it says in Leviticus, with regard to blood, with regard to miscarriage and placenta, right? In other words, this is what he's engaged in. This is what he's doing. King David went into all this trouble in order to render a woman ritually pure and consequently permitted to her husband. And why is he doing it? For the sake of another Jew, that she shouldn't be impure, but he could find a way, if the legal standing was that she was pure, so she would be permitted to have relations with her husband. If after examination a stage declares a woman ritually pure, she is permitted to be with her husband, which leads to increased love and affection and ultimately to procreation. Right? So, in other words, what is he saying? Other kings, they live the life of leisure, but no, I'm always there helping the people, remember, he's a king, but remember, he's a real Torah scholar, right? So he's here dealing with the nitty-gritty of every day, of people's challenges, people's issues, people's questions. Something so simple like, is this blood that makes the woman impure or not? And the ramification, it's not earth-shattering. It's not about war here, right? About war. Actually, it's interesting tie-in over here. Why did Jews fight a war? Anybody? Let's just finish this over here, and then we'll come to them. And not only do I engage in activity considered to be beneath the station of a king, but I consult my teacher, Voishis, the son of King Saul, son Jonathan, with regard to everything that I do. I say to him, Voishis, my teacher, did I decide properly? Did I convict properly? Did I acquit properly? Did I rule ritually pure properly? Did I rule ritually impure properly? And I wasn't embarrassed, for going my royal dignity should make me worthy to be called pious. This is his conversation with God. And we're privy to that. Am I not pious as a result of this? In other words, after midnight, he's devoted a whole night to learning Torah, to connecting with God. And then what does he do? What does he do? Afterwards, the other opinion is saying, oh my gosh, what an epiphany I just had. The other opinion is saying that he is then gets his hands dirty in blood, right? And making rulings for just one woman. I mean, 1 + 1 + 1, but right, just for one person, so that they should be able to be permitted to be with their husbands, so that will increase the love between them. Wow. So, folks who learned Tanya with me today, do you see the parallel? Huh? Reggie, you see the parallel? Eugenia, Davida, Libo, who sees the parallel from today's Tanya?
Yes, being holy, being high up somewhere, and at the same time being down, being able to bring
Exactly.
yourself down.
Wow. I didn't prepare this. God prepared this for us because I had, no idea. And I just had the epiphany now when I'm like reading this together with you. Oh my gosh, there's two opinions and not really different opinions, right? They're just different aspects of the character of King David, as we started off this paragraph. That first he's on top of the mountain. And remember, he's roaring like a lion after midnight, right? On top of the mountain. He's king of the jungle. He's there and absorbed in the divine to like no nth degree, right? Now, remember, the sages had to bring him down to earth. And initially, when they come and ask him, the people, they need livelihood. So what are we saying here now? Well, okay, that was previously. Now we're saying he's coming back down the mountain and he's coming to the minutia, into the singular person of bringing, enabling them, because he's in the blood, in the blood, all right, of trying to determine whether this is blood that's impure or pure. And that in order that this woman can get closer to her husband. A small little, detail of life. And even that, right, how does he do it? With great humility. And maybe that's the whole answer. Maybe that's the further tie-in. How is it possible that you can be a roaring like a lion, that you're so engaged in your Torah study, that you're like, so much so the sages have to come to you and almost like, get you off top of the mountain, right? That you shouldn't have kol nefesh. Your soul should not expire in the ecstasy and the thirst of being absorbed in the divine light. That you're able now to have the retreat from that advance. You're able to have the retreat and come back down into this world into such a way that you are dealing in dirtying your hands, unlike everybody else who wants to, just to like the regular royalty want to have pleasure of life, right? So they get up late and they sit with their own groups. Here I'm dealing with a woman that's a simple woman who's got a simple problem, right? About this, is this called dam nida? Is this called not, the blood of a menstrual cycle or not? And I have to look very closely to see what kind of dirt, you go to the rabbi and you looks at the wind by the light and looking very carefully this way, that way, folding it over. And it's such a small little detail, but you know what? In that small little detail is creating a home for God. Because now what did you do? If you were able to make that pure, right? You're able to, that they could live together in the sense of intimacy, right? And you're bringing and creating that home for God. How do you have the capability from top of the mountain down to the bottom? Humility. As king. He wasn't just king, by the way, in title. He wasn't just king as like, the ruler of the Jewish people, right? What does it mean he's king? he's really head and shoulders over the rest of us. And yet in his humility, he goes to meet to Ishbaishis, right? And asks him, am I ruling correctly? Which, by the way, that teaches an important lesson in our lives, that when we make a ruling, not necessarily not necessarily should we always go with our own understanding of things. We should ask, even if someone might be, lesser of knowledge, for sure if they have more knowledge, but we should ask. And because of that humility, that's what enables him to be on top of the mountain like a lion, and he could be in the bottom, in the minutiae and the details of just one person with one single need, that you could be there for them. That's King David. That's his character. And that's Tanya today. I can't believe it. Folks, I mean, I don't know if you need any proof that there is a God. And that one God, there's one Torah. It's one Torah. And it all ties in. You learn it in one place, you learn it in another place, and it's all the same. Oh my gosh. I'm like, this alone could cause the kalesa nefesh, the expiry of the soul. Amazing.
Rabbi, wouldn't it also explain our earlier Talmudic dilemma that perhaps the holy part, the part on top of the mountain of David, knew exactly when the midnight was, but the lyre and the harp was needed to wake up that lower part of him, to remind him to be down, so to speak.
I hear you. That's interesting take. The only trouble I have with that, it's very interesting. I like what you're saying. The only challenge I have with that is that, I mean, maybe it's not a challenge to it, but got to figure out how that would fit in, is that, remember, after that, he was on top of the mountain. So on top of the mountain, you're on top of the mountain. You're not on the bottom. Like, remember, it's not like you're balancing two things at the same time. You're not. You're not balancing the two things at the same time. I mean, the truth is, maybe what you could say is, front burner, back burner, so on the front burner, you're on top of the mountain, and that's the only reality now. So much so it's a reality that there's almost expiry of the soul, remember. So it's not like, you're balancing on top of the mountain, oh, I'm thinking about her and her issue. You're not thinking about her on top of the mountain. You're just, whether it's you're learning right now, right? Right now, you have an issue that you need to deal with. To give you an example what that means, let's say you're before the class, you had something you had to deal with, right? And right now, there's no dealing with that. That shouldn't be in your headspace at all. Back burner, you'll come back to it, fine. But it's not in your headspace. It's not in your heart now. The only thing is the Torah learning right now. Top of the mountain. There's no other reality. You finish, before you expire, come back down, retreat, and now bring it into to the minutia of everything. So that's why I would have a difficulty. Why would at midnight the heart be coming to the lower self, and that, or I don't know, the lower self or whatever, to the lower, to the retreat, when there's no retreat now? Yeah, he was a lion then. So there is no retreat. To fully engage, expiry of the soul. So, I mean, I like what you said, but I don't see how that would fit in with this. You're okay with my slugging you up?
Yeah, sure. Humility.
Sorry, I mean, it was good. I like the idea, but it doesn't fit in. I don't see how it would fit in unless you come back with another, or we can think of another way that it would fit in.
Well, I was thinking about Alter Rebbe, I think, when during the learning, he had to sometimes get the bagel in order to come back, so maybe that's what David needed, extra reminder.
Yeah, but not at midnight,
because
at midnight, he wasn't eating the bagel. It was only the Alter Rebbe and Rabbi Avram, the Malach, right, the Mizitcher Magid's son, who those two were learning together, they didn't learn and eat a bagel. They learned to such a degree that they came to expiry of the soul, that then they needed to eat the bagel. So it was only thereafter. Wasn't learning and eating bagel together. Wasn't that? It was just one. That's what I'm saying. You're the lion. You're on top of the mountain. You're expired of the soul. Only that. Then you got to come back down to retreat. That's a different movement, a different thing. So you eat the bagel, right? You come down and you're looking now and dealing with the small little minutia of, someone's issues and things that they have, and you're totally there for them, right? So it's not the two things at the same time. Is that clear, Eugenia? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
So that's where the difficulty. Again, it's like right now, you may have something that you need to do for somebody that's really important for them, and important that you do it, and no doubt. But when you're learning, or when you're davening, I have this struggle with not learning really so much, but I have that struggle in davening, because it's easier that your mind goes astray in davening. And my challenge is that and my God, it goes astray for things that are important, things that I need to do. Then I have to bring myself at, stop it. You're davening now. You're not doing that now, and you're not even planning it now, because now is not time for planning that. Now is a time to daven. Just focus in on the words and connect to Hashem, and that's it. So there is that thing that I need to do, and it's very important. Not at this moment. It doesn't exist. It shouldn't exist. I mean, shouldn't. We're human, so it does, right? But that's the struggle, is that we get beyond that. Are we clear? All right. Tafida, was it was it that King David was grounded by the people where they were and needed to essen the bagel of its putter? Yeah, and the fact that he came down and he was dealing with the minutia of other people, that's the bagel and putter of King David in a sense. Yes, to be, or maybe that's when the sages came and said the people need you. Maybe that's the bagel and butter. His bagel and butter, perhaps. We're only kind of comparing the ideas, but the concept is there, right? It's about the divine service, how it expresses itself. Bagel and butter, the sages came, and so on. The bagel and butter was only the grounding that now, go in and deal with the retreat, being here and bringing the presence of God here. King David brought the presence of God here, through, dealing with the judgment of, is this the blood that is being shown to him that the woman didn't know? Is this make me pure or impure? Or that was the issue. All right, folks, amazing. Wow. I gotta tell you, it's hard to come down from top of the mountain after you learn something like that powerful and connects. And we're getting an idea of the character of King David. So, by the way, I just want, just in conclusion, he says he's talking to God that because of his piety, so therefore, the house of David should continue. It's piety. And indeed, it does till today, right? Who comes from him? Mashiach. As a matter of fact, next week, maybe I'm going to give a class about bringing King David and Mashiach together. Since we're on King David, we're holding by him. Maybe we'll do with that next week. Well, we have, of course, Wednesday night. I think almost everybody, just a few you didn't sign up yet, but most of you did. It's going to be an amazing course. Just a reminder, Wednesday night. Will not be on this Zoom. You're going to get the specific different Zoom for the class. All right, folks. Been a pleasure. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi. Very good
Thank
class.
you, Rabbi.
Thanks so much.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
God bless. All the
Wow.
best. Bye.